Hello and welcome everyone. This is your English teacher Sir Sanjay. I welcome you all to yet another session of YouTube wherein we discuss lessons from English Honeydew text, English supplementary and grammar from time to time as the coronavirus pandemic has really modified the way we used to teach and learn. So here we are with yet another session on YouTube. So without any further ado and wastage of time, let us begin. If you remember, in the previous class, we have already started the lesson called The Best Christmas Present in the World, isn't it? We already have started teaching this lesson by the name The Best Christmas Present in the World. I have already given you preface, and the main man who has narrated this story is Jim Mac. The main man who's narrated this story, the writer, and there are persons like Jim McPherson, and then we have Connie, who appears to be Jim's wife. And then there is this letter which the writer discovers from a roll top desk, which he got from where? Where did he get the roll top desk from? He got it from a junk shop, isn't it? Junk shop for a little value because he had always wanted to purchase one, isn't it? So the writer buys this roll top desk. He now has an uphill task. He has this task of repairing it, isn't it? So as he repairs it, he comes across a black box which was secretively hidden as though it was a treasure, isn't it? So as the writer opens the letter, it dates back to the era where World War was fought, isn't it? 1914-15 era. World War began in 1914 and ended in 1918, to be precise. We are talking about First World War. So as the writer opens the letter and starts reading, he gets to know it is a letter written during war time, wherein a person called Jim McPherson, Jim, writes a letter to his beloved wife Connie to share something exciting that unfolded on the eve of Christmas or on Christmas Day, as the soldiers who were on the opposing side, who were who were obviously enemies, the Germans on one side and the Britishers on the other side, who were enemies otherwise, came together to celebrate Christmas, isn't it? Not only did they celebrate Christmas, they exchanged pleasantries, sausages, ration stocks, and so many things. And then they also went on to play football game. Football is something that unites people, isn't it? So they went on to play football game, and they played it by making some makeshift arrangement, isn't it, class? So this is what had happened in the previous session, as I have explained, and I'm sure most of you understood it. So alongwise, I also told you to go through and study once again on your own for clarity of thought. Okay, so these are the things we have completed. Here is the person who bought the roll top desk, and this is the black box which we were talking about. It contains a letter written by whom? A letter written by Jim McPherson, isn't it? Jim McPherson to whom? Connie, is it? So let's move along. So if you clearly remember, we ended the previous class here. So yes, now it's time for us to continue. So we have completed up to here, if you all remember. So now let us continue. I would prefer cricket, I told him. We are here, class. Okay. I would prefer cricket, I told him. Then we Thomas could be sure of winning, probably. We laughed at that, and together we watched the game. Sad to say, Connie, Fritz won 2 goals to 1. But as Hans Wolf generously said, our goal was wider than this, so it wasn't quite fair. Okay, so this is what. See if you can take a look at this picture. I'm sure most of you have opened your book alongside for better visibility. I'll just zoom it up for you. Yeah, just a second, class. Yeah, if you can look up at this picture, what you observe is, see, there are soldiers on both sides, isn't it? Soldiers here, soldiers here as well. And then there is this barbed wiring, right? And then this is the space between this barbed wiring is supposed to be the no man's land. No man's land. Okay. So this is where the football match was taking place with makeshift goal post and all. And then Jim goes on to share that the football match was won by Fritz, that is the German soldier, by what margin? The score read 2-1, means the German scores 2 goals to 1. Okay. To this, Jim says, Hans Wolf generously told him that the result wasn't fair because their goal was wider, means their goal post was wider compared to the goal post provided to them for scoring goal. Let's say this much was the difference. Okay, clearly this is wider. So this is what they were talking about. They were having a normal day, kind of a normal day. Okay, so let's move on now. Now we'll continue reading, class. We are here. The time came, and all too soon, when the game was finished. The schnapps and the rum and the sausage had long since run out, and we knew it was all over. I wished Hans well and told him I hoped he would see his family again soon, that the fighting would end, and we could all go home. Okay, so we have already known what schnapps means, isn't it? So, as the game progresses, everything they had ended. It was over. Okay, everything they had ended, it was over, and now it was time for them to get back to their respective camps because it was wartime. Okay, so Jim says he wished all the best to Hans Wolf, and then they headed back to their own camp. At the same time, Jim wished the very best to Hans Wolf, and Hans wished the same to Jim as well. Moving on, I think that is what every soldier wants on both sides, Hans Wolf said. Take care, Jim Macpherson. I shall never forget this moment, nor you. He saluted and walked away from me slowly, unwillingly. I felt. Okay. So they bade farewell to each other. So he saluted. And then Jim says, there was this unwillingness as Hans Wolf was moving. Unwillingness means he was not wishing this for this moment to end. That is why he was walking in a manner as though he was not feeling like going. He wanted the moment to continue for a little longer if possible. Okay. So moving on now. He turned to wave just once and then became one of the hundreds of grey coated men drilling back towards their trenches. So on his way back, he just turned back and waved at Jim for one final time before joining his troops. Okay? Moving on to the next paragraph now. We are here, class. That night, back in our dugouts. Dugout, we all know what dugouts are, isn't it? Dugouts are, see, the meaning is also written here. These are basically shelter for soldiers made by digging a hole in the ground and covering it. Okay. will be digging some hole in the ground and then cover them with some sort of shed so that people can sit in easily. Okay. So that night, back in our dugouts, we heard them singing a carol and singing it quite beautifully. It was Stille Nacht, German word, which means silent night. Our boys gave them a rousing chorus of white shepherds watched. We exchanged carols for a while and then we all fell silent. We had we had our time of peace and goodwill, a time I will treasure as long as I live. So, you know what happened? Once the soldiers headed back to their camp, they started singing carols. Carols are songs sung before and during Christmas. Okay, basically before Christmas, let's say on the eve of Christmas, they sing these songs in praise of Jesus Christ and all. So, carols were sung from both the camps. Okay, the Germans sang a carol by the name Stille Nacht, which means silent night. And then the British boys, they replied it back with another chorus by the name While Shepherds Watched. Okay, so it continued for quite some time, but then slowly and slowly, since it was wartime, they fell silent and it was over. Okay, but then Jim says, it's something he'll treasure. Treasure is something that is considered valuable, isn't it? So he'll treasure this memory. It will be etched in his memory for a long, long time. This is something he would never forget, is what Jim says here. Moving on to next page, class. Page 14th. Dearest Connie, by Christmas time next year, so this year's Christmas, Jim happens to spend it in war zone. Okay, where in war zone? It was First World War time. So now Jim is writing this letter and expressing few things. He says, Dearest Connie, by Christmas time next year, this war will be nothing but a distant and terrible memory. So Jim was hopeful of the fact that the war would be over by next year. Okay. He says it would be nothing but a distant and terrible memory, something that will not be pleasing. I know from all that happened today how much both armies long for peace. We shall be together again soon. I'm sure of it. Long here means wishing for. Okay. So Jim says, Connie, maybe by next year this war will be over. Okay. So he also was giving a hope to Connie that he'll be back home by next year. Okay. So he also expressed hope that they will be together soon. Means he'll get united with his beloved wife. Okay. So this is where Jim concludes his letter. See, your loving Jim. Okay. So Jim has shared one beautiful account of what had happened to him and his troops, okay, in the otherwise so-called war zone, wherein they were not supposed to have any sort of bash or a party, but then they converted that war zone into a friendly zone, and then they had a football match, they had a party, and then they exchanged pleasantries as well, isn't it? So moving on, there is this comprehension check section. Comprehension will check section basically will test your knowledge as to whether or not you have understand the topic taught to you. I believe it is all but clear. So go through it. Try and find answer of these questions on your own. What are the questions? Just let us just take a quick look. First one says, who had written the letter to whom and when? So the timeline is well written on down the letter, and it was written by Jim McPherson to Connie, right? So why was the letter written? There was reason. Something wonderful had happened, isn't it? You got to share it. So what job did Hans Wolf and Jim McPherson have when they were not soldiers? So Jim was a school teacher. How about Hans? Find it out. Had Hans Wolf ever been to Dorset? Why did he say he knew it? Do you think Jim McPherson came back from the war? How do you know this? Okay, so this also is another question which I believe you're capable of solving. So we'll move on now. third part of the story. Okay. In the first part, we found how the author, the narrator basically, got a roll top desk, and then as he was trying to repair it, he discovered a black box containing a letter. And then in the second part, he read the letter. The letter was written by some Jim McPherson to his wife called Connie, wherein he describes one beautiful Christmas day they had celebrated in the midst of war by exchanging what? By having a game played between them, and then by sharing ration quota and rum, whatever they had, isn't it? So now we are about to read the third part, since comprehension check is also done, class. And the third part, there will be two words that you should be wary of. Few words basically. Burned out. So what is the meaning of burned out? Burned out means destroyed by fire. Okay. Boarded up means with means covered with wooden boards. And then muddle headed means confused. So if you are muddle headed, you are confused. Okay. So let's continue. Third part, class. Here we go. I folded the letter again and slipped it carefully back into the envelope. I kept awake all night. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I drove into Bridport, just a few miles away. I asked a boy walking his dog where Cooper Beaches was. House number 12 turned out to be nothing but a burned out shell, the roof gaping, the windows boarded up. Okay. I knocked at the house next door and asked if anyone knew the whereabouts of a Mrs. Macpherson. Okay. Now something interesting is unfolding. The writer was touched. The writer was touched by the letter. Okay. So he carefully folded the letter and kept it back in the envelope into the envelope in the black box again by folding it. Okay. He says he kept awake all night. Okay. I kept awake all night. So something he had read something he had never been, he had experienced something he had never before. So this kept him awake all the night. He must be thinking about Jim McPherson and his wife. So by the morning, he decided to visit Mrs. McPherson. Okay, so that he could meet her. All right. So he drove into Bridport, okay, the place where Jim McPherson used to live. And then he asked some people where's the Cooper Beaches place was. So somebody told him that it was house number 12. But then when he reached the place, he found out that house number 12 was nothing but a burned out shell. Means it was a place which was completely destroyed by fire. Okay. House number 12, where Jim McPherson's wife by the name Connie McPherson lived, was nothing but a burned out shell. Means it was completely destroyed by fire. Right? So now what will happen? He was curious because he was directed to be where he was directed here to meet Mrs. MacPherson. But then when he came, there was nothing. It was a burnt out house, wasn't it? So Jim comes and approaches the next door neighbor, and what would he reply? Let's find out. Oh yes, said the old man in his slippers. He knew her well. A lovely old lady, he told me, a bit muddle-headed. But at her age, she was entitled to be, wasn't she? 101 years old. Oh, so see, Mrs. Macpherson was 101 years old. So when Jim goes and asks, where is this lady? She says, yes, I know. She lives in the next door. But she is little muddle headed. She lives little confused. But then the person tells him, at her age, she was 101-year old. It is how she is supposed to behave. She behaves strangely with confusion. Okay. She had been in the house when it caught fire. No one really knew how the fire had started, but it could well have been candles. She used candles rather than electricity because she always thought electricity was too expensive. The fireman had got her out just in time. She was in nursing home now, he told me. Burlington House on the Dorchester Road on the other side of the town. So interesting. Okay. So as the writer, the author, the narrator, as he approaches the neighbor, he gets to know few interesting thing about Mrs. Macpherson. He gets to know of her age. She was 100 years old. She was a bit muddle-headed. She used to live a bit confused. But then he says, for her age, this is normal because somebody behaving exactly normally at 101-year old is not possible. Okay. And then he also told her that she used to have this strange habit. She used candle because she thought electricity was way too expensive. That is why she used candle all the time. So suddenly one day what happened? Her house caught fire. Somehow she was just saved in time by firemen, but the house was in a dilapidated condition now. Okay. So the neighbor also gives him additional information. He gives her the whereabouts of this lady. He tells him that she is in Burlington House now on the Dorchester Road, which is on the other side of the town. Okay. So this must be nursing home, isn't it? So let's find out what lies ahead in the next page. Okay. So there is another comprehension check class. You would, I believe, do it on your own. Let's find out. I found the Burlington House nursing home easily enough. There were paper chains up in the hallway, and a lighted Christmas tree stood in the corner with a lopsided angel on top. So it was not difficult for the writer to locate Burlington House nursing home because it was Christmas time. There were paper chains up towards the hallway. Okay, and there was this lighted Christmas tree in the corner with a lopsided, slightly tilted angel on top of the Christmas tree. Christmas trees are decorated with variety of things, isn't it? So there was this lopsided angel on this Christmas tree as Jim approaches the nursing home. Okay, I said I was a friend come to visit Mrs. Macpherson to bring her a Christmas present. So Jim introduced himself as a friend, saying that he had come to visit her with a Christmas present. I could see through into the dining room where everyone was wearing a paper hat and singing. So as he was speaking, Jim's eye fell into the dining room. Okay. In the dining room, he saw something amazing. Everyone in the dining room was wearing a hat and they were singing. Okay. It seemed as though they were in festive mode. Alright. The matron, here receives to head nurse, had a hat on too and seemed happy enough to see me. She even offered me a mince pie. It's a neat table. Clear. So matron was very happy to have received Jim Macpherson, and then as a sweet gesture she offered him mince pie. Okay. She walked me along the corridor. Mrs. Macpherson is not with the others, she told me. She is rather confused today, so we thought it best if she had a good rest. She has no family, no one visits. So I'm sure she'll be only too pleased to see you. Okay. So nurse, uh, and Jim, nurse actually, the matron actually, uh, takes Jim to where Mrs. McPherson was lying, and then he tells her a few things about her. He says that she was kept aloof because she was kept alone because she was behaving in a rather strange manner from the morning. Okay. Additionally, she went on to tell that Mrs. McPherson doesn't have any relative, and so she will be extremely happy to see Jim. Okay, so now what happens ahead? Let's find out. She took me into the conservatory with wicker chairs and potted plants all around and left me. Okay. So now Jim was brought to the place where this lady was. Okay. And then the matron went away, leaving Jim in the place where Mrs. McPherson would be. Okay. Moving on to the next paragraph now. The old lady was sitting in a wheelchair. We all know what wheelchair is, isn't it? She had seated in a wheelchair, her hands folded in her lap. So, like normally elder people do, if even if we sit somewhere, we fold our hands in our lap, isn't it? Lap refers, I believe you all know what lap is. She had silver white hair pinned into a wispy bun. So she turned her hair into a wispy bun, and it was silver white in color, as referred to in the poem. But then this is not silver white as written as colored here. Okay, so the as per the description, the color of her hair was silver white, means it was graying, referring her old age. Okay, and she had pinned it down into a wispy bun, isn't it? Just take a look. This looks like a wispy bun. Okay. She was gazing out at the garden. So as Jim approaches, Jim sees that she was looking out of the window towards the garden. Okay. Hello, I said. She turned and looked up at me vacantly. So as Jim says hello, she looked confused. She turns up and looks at Jim's in a manner as though she was confused. She did not know who had called her, because it must be for years and years that nobody visited her. Okay. Happy Christmas, Connie, I went on. I found this. I think it's yours. As I was speaking, her eyes never left my face. So Jim says, Jim wishes her Merry Christmas, and then says, I think I found you something. Okay, so as Jim was speaking to her, she was constantly, looking at Jim, because elderly people, they take time to understand things. All right. Yeah. I opened the tin box, class way here. I opened the tin box and gave it to her. So the narrator opens the tin box and hands it over to her. That was the moment her eyes lit up with the recognition. So as soon as she receives the tin box, her expression changed completely. Her eyes had an expression of recognition. Okay. As recognition means as though she understood who it was, what was she receiving, what she was receiving. Okay, there was a sense of recognition, as if she was knowing what she has received. All this while she looked confused, and then she acted in a strange manner. But as soon as she received this letter, she had a sense of recognition. Her eyes lit up. Okay. With a sudden glow of happiness, she looked so happy. She was too excited. I explained about the desk, about how I had found it, but I don't think she was listening. So the writer says he had explained the entire circumstances of him finding the letter and the desk and everything, but then he also says maybe she was not listening at all to her, because she was kind of lost in the gift she had received. Okay, let's continue. For a while, she said nothing, but stroked the letter tenderly with her fingertips. So it appears that she had been waiting for this thing for a long, long time. So as soon as she got this, she stayed quiet, okay, and started gently stroking the letter tenderly, here means very softly, as though she was interacting with a human. Okay, so with her fingertip, she was simply stroking it. Okay, dashing it. Suddenly, she reached out and took my hand. So as the writer was standing, she just reached out and grabbed writer's hand. Her eyes were filled with tears. She was crying. Okay, and she says, "You told me you'd come home by Christmas, dearest." Okay, so she now, since there's been so much gap and there was no news of Jim anywhere, and then suddenly after so many years this man emerges with this box, and all those memory must be, flashing in front of her eyes. So she believes or thinks Jim MacPherson has arrived. She does not consider this is a different person. She thought it was Jim standing before him. So she grabs his hand and she was all in tears. She says, "You told me that you will be back home by Christmas. And here you are, the best Christmas present in the world. Come closer, Jim, dear, sit down." So she assumed him to be Jim. So she tells him to come closer and sit by her side, saying that she has just received the best Christmas present in the world. Okay. I sat down beside her and she kissed my cheek. So the gentle expression of happiness. She was so glad. She gently kissed the narrator. "I read your letter so often, Jim, every day. I wanted to hear your voice in my head." So she says, "I read your letter every day. I wanted to hear your voice, Jim." So they had a strong bond. It always made me feel you were with me. So she says, "I never felt you were away. Your letters were with me. And I kept reading your letters. And they made me feel as though you were always with me, Jim. It made me feel as though you were always with me." Okay. And now you are. Here we are. Now you are. Now you are back. Now you are back. Can you read it to me yourself? So she assumes, she believed that it was Jim himself. Okay, she says, "Now that you are back, my dear, can you read the letter yourself for me? Can you do me a favor?" Okay, she is not ready to believe that it was not Jim. She was so attached to Jim. She could not cope up with the loss of the Jim. Okay, because the letter never reached to her in time, and it was after such a long year, number of gaps, she received the letter. "Now you're back. Can you read it to me yourself? Would you do that for me? Would you do that for me, Jim dear? I just want to hear your voice again. I would love that so much." And he says, "Would you do that for me? I want to hear your voice so much again. Please go on and read the letter for me. I would love that so much. And then perhaps we'll have some tea." So she thinks it is normal time. Okay, after he gets done with the letter, she also is not realizing that she is in a hospital. She says, once Jim reads the letter, they'll have tea. Okay. "I've made you a nice Christmas cake, marzipan all around. I know how much you love marzipan." So this is what he, has well and truly believed that Jim has arrived. So she goes on to say, "After you finish reading this letter, we'll drink tea, and then I have prepared marzipan. You love marzipan, right? We'll have marzipan is what Connie says. So Connie is not in terms with her reality. She, because it was a sudden shock, isn't it? It was kind of trauma. All those memories must have flashed in front of her eyes, and she was not able to understand who this person actually was. Okay, class. So, class, with this, the wonderful story is over. It's written by Michael Morpurgo. Okay, wonderful story actually. This has taught us contrasting reaction, isn't it? Wartime and how war, breaks families. War is nothing but a sign of destruction. So this chapter's explanation is officially over here. Let's take a quick look at comprehension check. What do we have here? Who did Connie Macpherson think her visitor was? Very simple. I've just told you. Which sentence in the text shows that the visitor did not try to hide his identity? Okay. So there was a text. There was certain text, isn't it? He says, "I have something of you." It's very simple. Then we have more exercises working with the text section. For how long do you think Connie had kept Jim's letter? How long do you think? Give reason for your answer. So class, go on and try this. Maybe we can have another session for explaining all this, isn't it? And going through this exercises. I believe this explanation will do the needful. By next class, I want you to be ready enough, okay, to be able to actually answer this questions. Okay. So with this, we come to conclusion. Thank you everyone for listening, watching, listening and watching. Now, since this is an unprecedented time, stay at home. Try to optimize your learning by watching these videos. Okay. Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful to share experience of this lesson with you all. Keep learning. Keep working hard. Thank you, everyone. Let's wind up the session here. Goodbye. Have a great time ahead.